I mean, it is very surprising that Liverpool are finding this conundrum. You know, if you're getting beat by Nottingham Forest and Leeds in consecutive league games, then there's a challenge afoot. Welcome to this week's edition of One-to-One with Simon Jordan. Of course, keep remembering to like and subscribe, but equally as importantly, leaving those questions in the comment section below. But let's get to this week's show. I mean, obviously Liverpool are in a slight conundrum at this moment in time because they seem to be finding it far easier in Europe than they do in the Premier League. I would suggest that the Premier League's offerings at this moment in time are perhaps more difficult than the challenges they've got in the Champions League, which is an irony in itself. Have FSG let Klopp down? Well, it's difficult to understand why Klopp wouldn't be supported. It's difficult to understand why he wouldn't be backed. They've bought £70 million strikers in the last window. There is an argument being advanced repeatedly that there is a need for attention in the centre of the park, in centre midfield. So can you say that FSG have let him down? Can you say that Klopp hasn't identified the need for change and done what most great teams do, which is revitalise, replenish and reinvigorate? I mean, it is very surprising that Liverpool are finding this conundrum. You know, if you're getting beat by Nottingham Forest and Leeds in consecutive league games, then there's a challenge afoot. And obviously Nottingham Forest have gone on to get beat 5 by Arsenal. Leeds have been very unlucky, I think, so I think that was a result waiting to happen because they've been very unlucky in their performances recently, most notably when they played Crystal Palace, which I know is not in the same zip code as Liverpool, but most notably they absolutely destroyed Palace for 45 minutes and somehow Palace got a result out of that game. And if you listen to Jesse Marsch, I know I'm going off-piste about what Liverpool have and haven't given their manager, but if you listen to Jesse Marsch's little outburst during the course of the week, I think he was right about getting fed up with losing games that they should have won. But going back to Liverpool, there is more than enough in that existing environment to be overcoming the challenges that they've got. There seems to be a malaise across the side, whether it's the constant issue with Trent Alexander's inability to be able to defend, whether it seems to be the lackadaisical nature of Virgil van Dijk at times, except of course when they're, you know, hugely aroused for the arrival of Man City. There's back passes from Joel Gomez that that managers can't legislate for. But I think there is a case to be said that en masse, this blame attribution game, which is blame the manager, blame the ownership, the players currently aren't doing enough. Yes, in order for them to compete with Manchester City, and at this moment in time, Arsenal, because they seem to be far more coherent, Liverpool perhaps need to be doing more in their recruitment. But that does not excuse the current performance from the Liverpool side. That is not up to snuff. It's not good enough. So I don't think it's just about attributing blame to FSG. If Klopp, who doesn't strike me as backward about coming forward, has really pushed hard and been knocked back by FSG and told to get back on his box and he's got what he's got, then there's an answer to say, what would you expect? Because everything has its life cycle. The other side of the argument is, if Klopp hasn't pushed hard enough, but with a manager that's been there 7 years, is considered to be the second coming, then it's a blame game, if that's what we want to do, for everybody. But I think Liverpool are going through a difficult period. It may just simply be because of the way that they play. They have to revitalise more often than other sides that perhaps are more controlled in the way that they play, because Man City are a very sophisticated side and Arsenal are becoming a sophisticated side, whereas Liverpool are a more feral, aggressive, dynamic team, which may mean that they need to replenish in certain areas of the park. But I prefer to look at the en masse situation and say, have they all done enough, rather than go, it's John Henry's gang, it's someone else's fault, rather than the 25 players that make up the squad, or however many Liverpool have got in their squad, and the manager and coaching staff that should have enough in their locker to overcome Leeds and Nottingham Forest. FSG and making a change with Klopp, I think that would be ridiculous. Unless you're going to tell me, almost like an IKEA flat pack, who you're going to bring out of the wings to take over the incredible evolution at times that Jurgen Klopp has put on Liverpool. Let's be clear about arguments about what people expect. In the turn of this century, Liverpool, Manchester City and Chelsea, out of the 23 Premier Leagues, have won 19 of them. They have more economic power than the other clubs, specifically Manchester City and Chelsea, because of the nature of their ownership model. Manchester United are a unique phenomenon that seem to be able to print money even in the absence of success. So when you look down the barrel of what Liverpool should and could be doing, because once upon a time in the 80s and 70s they dominated English football, when the whole English football landscape was very different, is a slightly flawed argument. Do we think Klopp's run his course? 7 years is a long time, but there'll be peaks and troughs, and I think it would be a ridiculous scenario where someone comes out and suggests that Jurgen Klopp needs to be replaced. You'd have to come out with someone pretty exceptional to take over from where Jurgen Klopp is. I think Klopp has the ability to arrest this situation. We are only 12 games into a strange Premier League season, because who would have oddsed the nature of the makeup of this league at this moment in time? Arsenal being as outstanding as they are, Chelsea being all over the place, and some would say that was an inevitability after the ownership challenges during the summer. I don't think so. United seem to be regaining their poise, but you wouldn't have picked Liverpool, and you possibly wouldn't have picked Newcastle to be doing what they're doing, and I know Jim White probably would, because he's bet me £1,000 that Newcastle will go in the top 6. For charity, by the way, before anyone starts talking about the outrageous profligacy. But no is the short answer. I think it would be a really silly fool's errand to start up the engines and the narrative of let's get Klopp out. I would take, obviously, Harry Kane. I would be very mindful of the performance of Ivan Toney, albeit I don't understand why he was called in the squad to sit on the bench when we know what the other strikers look like in the last get-togethers. So that would indicate that possibly the thinking isn't there for him to be part of that. But if you're asking me for what my opinion is worth, I would take Ivan Toney, because I think he provides a completely different look and feel. I also think he's an incredibly talented player and is well worthy of an international opportunity. And I think I would probably go Tammy Abraham. I've always been a major advocate of his. I think he's a real talent. I don't think he got the opportunities at Chelsea that he should have got, and I think going to Roma has shown a different sort of outlook that the boy has in terms of pushing himself and playing abroad in a difficult league that ultimately, whilst not as compelling as the sort of Italian sides of yesteryears, is still a very difficult league to play in, and he's gone there and done well. So I would take those three. Those would be my three. And then actually thinking about it, whilst I'm squaring a circle in my mind, Callum Wilson is an exceptional player. He's been exceptional for Newcastle in times when they haven't been a good side, and he is now flying for Newcastle. The problem with Callum Wilson is that he has such a propensity to break down that you never know when he's going to be fit. But I would factor 4 into my thinking, perhaps, and if I could factor 4 in, if I could get a fourth one in, it would perhaps be between Callum Wilson and Ivan Toney. But Callum Wilson also is remiss of me not to put him in the first 3. But I think Callum Wilson, Ivan Toney, Harry Kane, and Tammy Abraham would be the ones that I'd look towards. And that means that I don't think Marcus Rashford has done enough just because he's suddenly come alive for 5 minutes. But we know Southgate. We know how he thinks. It's not about what they're currently doing, it's about what they did for him once. And strange outlook that is, because by that nature you'd never replace anybody. And of course, he'll be taking Raheem Sterling, no doubt, even though his club form doesn't merit it. But 4 strikers, and 3 of those would be a pick that I'd have. I think we're very guilty of micromanaging everything, like comparing everything to yesteryear. Were we so good 30, 40 years ago? I know we had referees like Jack Taylor that refereed the 1974 World Cup final, and people like George Courtney and other referees that we look back on and with great fondness. The game has evolved and changed, and we are, in this country, very adept at pulling everything down rather than looking at what we have got and criticising. The reasons why we have VAR is because football has evolved to such a level that the scrutiny and attention put on refereeing by the nature of the camera angles, the 360 degrees, 7-day-a-week, 24-hour access that broadcasters have, which I'm not criticising, but I'm saying has brought about a scrutiny on referees. I repeatedly talk about the nature of referees seemingly being the only component part of football that's not allowed to make a mistake. Players can make a mistake, managers can make a mistake, but referees can't. So I don't subscribe to the view that the standard of refereeing has diminished. I don't subscribe to the view that we've got this wonderful litany of referees all around Europe that are setting the standard for us. I subscribe to the view that we have a great ability in this country to self-flagellate, to turn around and say everything is worse in this country. If there's a football hooliganism problem, it's the English disease, and then you look across the continent and find out there's just as many thugs in different parts of Europe there is in our country, but we seem to be adept at, building up in our situation, and the same with our referees. And with VAR and with the laws and the thinking behind the laws, people have got to come to the table and be more professional. If there's a problem with the handball rule, like the goal that West Ham scored last week, where a accidental handball that drops to another player next to you doesn't count as a handball, then you've got to look at the rules and say, where are the Premier League clubs? Where are the FA in denoting the problems with the rules and going back to IFAB at the beginning of each season saying we put a note in that we object to these rules, we don't think they're good enough, we don't think they're fit for purpose, we don't think they're thought through well enough. And then you'll have the other argument that constantly gets abounded by people trying to square a circle without really thinking about it. Graham Souness does this. We need more players refereeing. Okay, well, nothing's stopping them. And when you get players in Stockley Park, you'll then talk about the fact, well, he's not a Premier League player, so he doesn't understand Premier League pace and style and the competency of players, because if you get a League One player, a former League One player or a League Two player or a non-league player that can apparently see what happens on the pitch better because they've played the game, there'll always be a reason why refereeing isn't where it needs to be, because it's an easy target to aim at. And most of the time, if you've got in any walk of life, whether it's the uptime on the internet or your broadband or anything else, if you get a 97, 98% level of service, people would say that's brilliant. In refereeing, if you make 2 mistakes out of 100, you're a pariah and you're useless. And I think that's wrong, and I think we're looking at it the wrong way. I think we should be building up a culture of a damn sight more respect for refereeing decisions, not unaccountability for bad decisions, not letting them off the hook when they make mistakes, but stopping this race to the bottom to decry and demean our refereeing, when on the whole, we're not bad. Right, that's it for this week's edition of One to One with Simon Jordan. Let me know your views on Liverpool and their current form, the future of Klopp, and of course, the state of English refereeing. Don't forget to keep liking and subscribing and leaving those questions in the comment section below. And I look forward to seeing you next week.